Joining me today on the Maritime Effect is Kathy Metcalf, President and CEO of the Washington-based Chamber of Shipping of America. The Chamber is one of the most important and influential entities in the U.S. shipping industry. Its members are U.S.-based companies that either own, operate, or charter ocean-going vessels, and its mission is to represent their interests regarding U.S. and international legislative, regulatory, and administrative entities. With her background, Ms. Metcalf presents a myriad of topics I could discuss, and I do hope she will agree to return. However, for today, I am focusing on the future of women in the shipping industry and Ms. Metcalf's career in arguably one of the biggest industries, if not the biggest industry on the planet. Ms. Metcalf, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Before we get into your background, briefly set the stage and give us a sense of the size, magnitude, and importance of the shipping industry to life on this planet.
Wow, that's a big question, but it's one I think, particularly in today's world, we are uniquely aware of with the disruptions we're seeing in supply chains worldwide. Couple that with the recent shutdown in some Chinese ports due to COVID, and we're seeing a whole lot of impact. So rather than tell you how big it is when it's working well, let me just define that as how big it is when it's not working well. And we go to our stores and our shops and find out things that we're used to being able to purchase are not there in the quantities to meet the demand. So it's huge. Shipping industry has a very large responsibility to the global economy, but we also have an equally important responsibility for safe operations and with due protection of the environment. So it's huge. That's the best way I can answer.
Why did you choose the maritime industry in which to build a career, and how did you get into the field in the first place?
Well, the maritime industry chose me. My original goal, and there's a bit of a lesson to the audience of this in a very brief answer. My intention was to attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, New York. I was born a few years too early because the military academies in the United States did not start accepting women until 1976. I graduated from high school in 72. None of the academies were open to women. So I began a pre-med course at the University of Delaware. In my second year, I received a phone call on a payphone, and on the end of that phone, with the call I received, I heard a voice that says, "Is this Kathy Metcalf?" And I said, "Yes, it is." So this is Joe Biden.
Are you kidding?
It was Joe Biden in 1970, late 73, early 74, actually, to be correct. And he was advising me to let me know that the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy was going to accept women in 1974. They were permitted to do that because they were under the Department of Transportation, not the Department of Defense, which at that time statutorily barred women from attending the academies.
Wow.
Not because they didn't want women, but because the mission of the military academies were to produce Americans to defend the country in time of war. That's part of the phrasing and mission. The other statutory bar to that was a law that said women could not be assigned to combat positions. So if you take those two together, there's absolutely no support for women going into West Point Air Force, Navy, or Coast Guard. The United States Merchant Marine Academy didn't have that problem. And given that it was a federal academy, a full 4 years, at relatively low expense, that's the way I got into the maritime industry. And Senator Biden actually issued my nomination, held a big press conference, and a big to-do was made, much more than what I preferred, but my parents were bursting with pride. And that's the way I got into the maritime industry, with still the intention of completing my training at the academy in 4 years, along with 1 year at sea. One of those 4 years is at sea. And then joining active duty, probably the Army, going to medical school at the Armed Forces Medical School and not bankrupting my parents in the educational process.
Oh, my goodness.
So
Well, I feel cheated, Kathy. I mean, you would have been a 4-star general, you know, you would have been a 4-star general. I feel absolutely cheated. I'm sure women listening to this are going to say, oh my good heavens, but the world has changed. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how it has changed and the progress that still has to be made. The sector is seeing indeed an increasing number of women at high levels. You are a perfect example of that. And there are captains that are, female captains on ships and all sorts of areas of the industry. So change is occurring across the board. What are some of the specific areas where you see where this change is happening?
Well, I think in the 40 plus years that I've been in the industry, you're seeing more women on board ships, but even more than that, I think you're seeing a lot more women in the executive suite of a number of companies. If you just look at the
short side as opposed to seaside.
Exactly.
I see.
The sea side is wide open for competent people, including females. I think the seaside is still got a lot more cultural changes that need to be made, because you still have a lot of folks my age, and heaven forbid some older, that grew up in the old days of men are men and sailors are men, and heaven forbid some people used to believe it was bad luck to have a woman on a ship. I think that's changing. It's changing gradually. There's a number of programs at IMO and at WISTA, the Women in Shipping and Trading Association, are working to increase the diversity, both shoreside and onboard ship. We still have a long way to go. We still have some sexual assault, sexual harassment issues. But my point there, and I've dealt with some members of Congress on this issue, SASH, as we call it, sexual assault, sexual harassment, is not a marine industry problem. It is an industry problem. And there are cultural changes that need to be made across all industrial sectors, including the maritime. So for your listeners, we're getting there. It's just a bit slow. The one thing I would point out, we now have in the United States a new U.S. Coast Guard Commandant that takes command, I believe, the 1st of June. For the first time in history,
yeah.
A woman is the new commandant. And that's not only the first U.S. Coast Guard commandant that's a woman, it's the first woman to ever lead a branch of a U.S. Armed Force. Her name is Admiral Linda Fagan. If you ever get a chance to meet her, she is wonderful, and she is a leader. She's progressive, and she's probably one of the most competent women I've ever met in my life, having known her back when I had brown hair and she was only a lieutenant in the Coast Guard. As commandant, she now has 4 stars. So
a little bit about her and her trajectory to that position.
It's a long and varied trajectory to be able to be suitable for the commandant selection. She has had command on Coast Guard vessels. She's had a lot of shoreside work and assignments. She knows how headquarters works. When I first met her, I believe she was in commercial vessel compliance. She then went out and became a captain of the port, moved up to area commander and a district commander. And that's the advancement stage. The typical senior command in the Coast Guard follows. They want experiences both at sea as active Coast Guard and ashore.
Very interesting. Well, you alluded to one of the humbugs that would perhaps be a problem really for women advancing in positions at sea. This woman has overcome them, and that is the fact that the ship is not necessarily a female-friendly environment. What are some of the issues? You talked about some of them before, sexual harassment, but in terms of just the logistics of spacing.
Well, I would suggest, let's broaden your statement, that shipboard environment is not always a human-friendly environment, much less men or women.
Right.
I don't have to talk about how bad the weather can get, how sometimes for 24 to 48 hours, you're rolling back and forth. It's a challenging environment in which to work. As far as specific for women, I give you a very basic example. When I started sailing my first sea year period in 1975, you had to be sure and pack all your female hygiene needs because they were not available on the ship.
Right.
And that's kind of an obvious one, but I think with good training and good preparation, and it's up to all of us older ladies to try and be sure that our younger female colleagues get the kind of picture they need of what it's like to sail on a ship or even to work in the maritime industry ashore. It's a challenging industry. And the only way we can prepare the next generation is for our generation and a generation behind me to serve as mentors. And I think that's what's so great about what you're doing with your work.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for saying that. I'm really very interested in the trajectory of your career. What were some of the challenges that you faced along the way?
Well, first of all, I've got to preface that by saying that I'm stubborn and bullheaded.
I know that, Kathy.
So, and so I think it doesn't hurt to have a gentle peace in your personality.
Yes.
That when you see adversity or you see challenges in front of you, it actually enhances your performance.
That's right.
It's kind of like the first time I navigated a ship out of a ship channel. I was scared to death. I won't tell you. It was like, oh yeah, let's just go. You're scared because it's the first time you've done anything like that. And to perform and get through that gives you an extra building block that makes you believe, quite frankly, you can handle pretty much anything that's thrown your way. Some specific examples. One of my professors at the Merchant Marine Academy the first year, who I adore and still speak with on a occasional basis, particularly at reunions, told me that he didn't think women should be at the academy, but he promised me that he would teach me and provide the challenges he did, just like he had years past for my male counterparts. And I respected that honesty. A similar event happened when I signed on to my first ship as a third mate. The captain said, well, he was a country guy from South Texas, fairly old at the time, very competent master. He told me, he said, well, I don't really believe women should be on ships, but you're welcome as much as I would welcome your male counterparts. So have at it. And quite frankly, when I signed off that ship, the evaluation I got, and I was a new third mate. You don't know a whole lot as a third mate. I've always said your education, when you end your education and start to move into the working world, your education simply says you're ready to start learning the real life application of skills. And so I take that very seriously, but my evaluation when I got off that ship, having made typical new third mate mistakes, you would have thought that he was nominating for the Admiral of the Ocean Seas Award.
Oh, yeah.
And in actuality, this is where some of the gender issues go the other way. I was no better or worse than the average new third mate. I did get out and spend time off watch trying to learn things, which you have to do that. But I was no better, no worse. And my evaluation was so much better than most new third mate evaluations. So I wasn't as good as he said I was, but I did appreciate the fact that they recognized that I had worked, very hard at it. On the shore side, I have really run into no gender-based challenges. I've worked for 2 energy companies, and the shore-based piece of it, I had sailed for 6 years, came ashore first as a safety and health coordinator, and at night I went to law school. And so, well, it was a no-brainer because my company had a tuition reimbursement program, and not taking advantage of a benefit like that is like refusing a pay raise. So I got that and then was transferred into a compliance department at the headquarters level. I did that for about 17 years and then came to the chamber.
That's interesting. So attitude is a very big thing. Get the chip off your shoulder, put your shoulders to the wheel, and keep going. What made you decide to, to move to work on land, a shore-based job?
Well, in reality, I was honest with myself. I did not have God-given ship handling skills. There are two kinds of people. Well, there are actually three. People that have absolutely no skill, people that have the ultimate God-given skill, and the rest of us in the middle, which are we can make it, we're mediocre. But I realized from watching some of my counterparts that a life at sea with my, at that time, and I still consider mediocre ship handling skills, I had no desire to become a master. I wanted to get shipboard experience. And then I had come ashore tentatively just for a 6-month period and was going to go back out to sea. And they asked me to stay on board. And it was a tough decision, but I thought the future and for me was in the shore-based side of the industry.
And did you know that early on? I mean, here you are training, you want to go to the academy and you ended up at sea. Did you know at that point that you would transition to a land-based job? Or?
Well, I didn't know it going in. I wasn't disappointed that I arrived at the conclusion I did, but it took some thought process because I was not too far away from elevating my license to chief mate level. So that was part of the negative about coming ashore when I was asked to.
I see.
But I thought a better fit for me was shore-based. I also had no siblings, and I have 2 parents that are now in heaven, but I wanted to be in a position to be able to help them. They lived about an hour and a half away from my home when I came ashore, and I felt better prepared to assist them with a shoreside job than I could being halfway around the world on a ship.
Of course. That's very interesting because, when I talk to a number of my mentees, male and female, many of them in the Caribbean, their first time going to college, they feel a great sense of responsibility to the family.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of their consideration. Taking a broad look at career opportunities in the industry, we talked about seaside and, and shore-based jobs. How would you advise a young woman today to assess her career choices within the context of the maritime world? Young women who they know they want to be in this space, in this industry.
Okay. Well, I think you need to look at your regional or even global training organizations. If you go on a number of those websites, if you go on the Merchant Marine Academy, U.S. Merchant Marine Academy website, you can see all the various majors that are available. But you've got to find out inside, in your heart, what will give you joy. But the other thing I will advise is have a plan, but you dang well better have some flexibility built into it. Because as I said, when I started this path at the academy, I was going to become a doctor in the armed forces and then do my 8 years duty and then become a physician. Look where I am now. Nowhere close to the medical field. So like I said, I think it's important to have a plan. Also, if possible, if you can find some contacts that work in the industry that can give you an idea of what it's like to work in the industry as a whole or in their particular sector, I think that's a good way too. And then also
that's where the mentorship comes in, Kathy. Yes. And you talked about that earlier. As a woman, you feel you have a great sense of responsibility to kind of mentor young women coming into the sector. And you think that's important, almost as important as their degree.
I think it's probably more important because I don't know about you, but I know a lot of idiots that have degrees. And so if you have a degree, you've got to layer on top of that the work experience.
Right.
And that's what makes you good, or in some cases not so good at what you've chosen to do. And if you get into a piece of the maritime industry you don't like, there's a lot of mobility in between areas, particularly if you're ashore. The hard thing is where you put your toe in the water first.
I see.
And a number of maritime training organizations will have open houses. So if, let's say you're in secondary school, high school, as we call it, and you think this is an industry you would like to get into, particularly in the US, we have academy days in high schools. And usually academy graduates will come talk to the students that may be contemplating going to one of the academies. The career path that it opens up for you. I mean, there's just a multitude of pathways to get to where you want to go. And by the way, you're not going to know where you want to go until you get on the path. So make sure you've got flexibility.
Right. Well, we're looking at exactly what you've just described now. Our foundation, the American Caribbean Maritime Foundation, is setting up a series of those visits by people in the industry to introduce the industry to young people at the high school level. Yeah, it's really important. But you also mentioned getting that experience, which is always tough in any industry. You know, you present to a potential employer, they say, you don't have any experience. Oh, how can I get the experience unless you give me the experience? How did you manage that? What's your best advice to women about how to navigate that? Do they volunteer? What do they do?
That is the perfect chicken or the egg paradigm. When you get started in your maritime training, whether it's an academy or a trade school, I always advise people to search for companies that offer internships. In some cases, in big companies, they're actually paid positions, but in some smaller companies, they're not, but they will accept people that are in training at that point in time to allow them to be exposed to the operations ashore. Now, you don't have too many internships on board the ship. That's
what they call it now is sea time. Sorry to interrupt you. In the Caribbean, according to the IMO regulations, you have to have 6 to 9 months of time on a vessel during which you're being paid a stipend. And those opportunities are few and far between. Again, this is an area our foundation is aggressively working to open up those opportunities on vessels, you know, whether it's the cruise sector or the cargo sector. Those opportunities are far and few between.
They are, and I would guess typically few and far between with smaller companies. But if you are engaged in your training program and go up to a company, call a company and say, look, I'm not interested, but I wouldn't start the negotiation by I'm not interested in pay. I would say, I'm trying to get some experience so that when my training is complete, I will have that experience for my first true job. Now, on board the ship is a little more difficult. At the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, one of the 4 years that we spend there, we spend at sea.
That's right.
Right. And we're having some problems right now because there's some SASH issues and they've stopped that program. Our state training academies, there's 5 of them, also have training ships. So while a training ship is good, it's basically a ship full of cadets with some instructors on board teaching basics. The difference between that and being on a truly operating commercial ship is there's only usually 2 cadets on board that, and you're working alongside the ship's crew on doing a variety of tasks. So you're right, we need to find more of those. That's been discussed at IMO as well.
Sure.
Again, the big companies, the Maersk, for instance, a number of the energy companies have those kinds of programs. But if you're a small company that's operating maybe 5 ships, you probably don't have the infrastructure to bring an intern in as part of your corporate program. That doesn't mean if you go up to them and say, hey, I'd like to spend a month or 2 working up, I'll make coffee if I have to, or I'll empty the garbage. But if I could just get some time and understand how you operate within the context of the real world, I would be most appreciative. And I think you can find those, but it's.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Of course, in the Caribbean, we'd love to have a training vessel What ships nowadays cost somewhere between 10 and $20 million a second-hand vessel. Oh, good heavens, would it be great to have one of those? But that's in the future, certainly for our foundation to look at how we can make that happen for the region. But this is a humbug for our young people to get them what I call that last mile before they qualify, to work on a vessel. Well, I could just go on and on with, just hearing about your remarkable experience and having you share with us your experience over the years. Kathy, it has been such an honor to have you on the program. Thank you for being our guest and for being a role model to women, and also for your remarkable leadership.
I have been blessed, and I thank you for the invitation. And for those of you that are listening to this, do not give up. If you see something you want, you go for it. There's a way forward to get there.
Praise God. I hope you'll join us again.
I will indeed.
Thank you.